Good Moed and Shabbat Shalom. You know those situations where you look back on them and you think, gosh, if I only had that perfect response, that little thing to say, the comeback to someone's perfectly misplaced comment to you. Almost 20 years ago, I had the privilege of performing the wedding for my sister and brother-in-law. Shortly before the wedding, I checked in with the musician who would be accompanying the ceremony and reviewed with him the cue for the recessional music. His response was not, thank you, or cool, or got it, or appreciate the reminder. Rather, it was, I've done this hundreds of times before. I found this answer unsatisfying and downright obnoxious, I guess, if I'm being honest, right? I don't remember if I had something smart to say back to him in the moment, but I remember pretty quickly examining my own emotional reaction and realizing that you may have played music. You may have played music for hundreds, maybe thousands of weddings, but also you've never, ever, ever accompanied my sister's wedding. When I think back to the aftermath of October 7th, 2023, I remember being stupefied by what had just happened and terrified about what might happen next. I sent text message after text message to people in Israel and people here in the States who I knew had strong connections to Israelis and Palestinians in the land. I had a lot of conversations checking in with people and checking in with them again, telling people I was thinking of them, showing them I was thinking about them by reaching out, and for the moment, making sure that they were all right, whatever that meant at that point. I tried to offer myself as an address for people's grief and anxiety. And I guess if I'm being honest with myself, maybe that offer was also one of the ways in which I was dealing with my own grief and anxiety by giving myself some sense of purpose. There were so many conversations filled with meaning, with grief, with despair, with anxiety. And amidst those hard but intentionally beautiful and real conversations was one conversation that still really disturbs me to think back on. There was a group of people in the Jewish community, and one person in the room explained to us that we were now going to follow a playbook, that there was a playbook of what we do when there's a tragedy in the Jewish community. We issue a statement. We say there's going to be a vigil. Here are the people who should talk at the vigil and not talk. Here are some prayers that we should say and songs. A playbook. It felt so gross. It felt so unresponsive to something that was unprecedented. I mean, does a playbook also explain what happened until this moment? Does a playbook really explain how we're getting to somewhere else? Does the playbook articulate a pathway of safety for the Jewish people in the world when October 7th clearly showed a lack of safety for us? Is it a specifically Jewish playbook? And if so, how does that help us live our best values? I still struggle with anyone thinking that there was anything beyond being real, feeling what we were feeling, being in the moment, showing up for one another, and trying to put this community tragedy into some kind of a box. It seemed like hubris then. and it also seemed disrespectful to the people who were murdered and to the people who ended up in captivity. I suppose when I think about the past couple of years, one of the lessons I think about is the power of saying, I don't know. I don't know every single detail of exactly how we got here or how we got there 2 years ago, but I want to learn. I don't know exactly what the pathway is or a pathway could be for Jewish people to be safe in the world, but I want to learn more about that. I don't know the best way to live our values when so many of our leaders seem to get in our way. In his 8 chapters, Introduction to Pirkei Avot, Maimonides echoes that none of us has all the answers. Rather, we must be open to hearing knowledge from all around us, even in perhaps the least expected places. 2 years later, my observation is that there are still plenty of leaders who continue to draw moves from mythic playbooks that have done a disservice to an Israeli society and worldwide Jewish people who are still grieving and traumatized. And some of those plays, litmus tests, traps disguised as questions, prioritizing propaganda over lived experience, and shady political alliances. So many of those plays have not brought us closer to healing, to peace, to justice, to equality. Some continue to repeat old patterns, expecting to get different results, and there are people, maybe not enough in my opinion, who are losing credibility. If I were the mayor of every Jewish leader worldwide, I believe our first professional development activity would be learning how to say, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. And really, really meaning it. If anyone had all the answers, there would not have been an October 7th, 2023. If anyone had all the answers, we would not still be waiting on the edge of our seats, up late at night for these hostages to come home. And we would not be considering the mystery of how on earth the Jewish people are going to live with the colossal destruction of human life since that has been done in our name. We human beings sometimes try to make sense of the world by putting people and ideas into neat little categories. Black and white, good and evil, pro and anti. We don't have to look much further than the White House to see that people who do not have our best interests at heart not only love to invent binaries, but then exploit the categories of those made-up binaries to divide, to demonize, to harm human beings with impunity. It is a far cry from the queer theory that warns us not to put everything into neat little boxes, because those neat little boxes ultimately prevent us from connecting with and honoring one another's full humanity. Even the Torah's creation story in 7 days, where there are some divisions, day and night, seas and skies, for instance, even that creation story will come to remind human beings that each of us reflects the divine with all of God's holiness and with all of God's complexity. Sukkot is a holiday that challenges us to break down binaries. Throughout Sukkot, we shake a lulav, a bundle of 4 species that we often say represent at least 4 different types of people coming together. On Sukkot, the ancient rituals in the temple were not limited to sacrificial offerings for the Jewish people, but we made offerings for every single nation of the world. On Sukkot, not only do we welcome guests It'll be hard to get all of us in there outside. But do we welcome guests into our sukkah who are right here physically in the flesh? But we welcome sublime guests, biblical heroes. We even blur the binary between this world and the next. And of course, the sukkah itself is fragile, and yet it is a shelter. Rabbi Jeff Fox of Yeshivat Maharat shares the Talmudic debate between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer, interpreting what the actual origin is in the Torah of building a sukkah. Why really do we do it? Is building a sukkah and dwelling in it a recapitulation of the relatively flimsy encampments our ancestors created in the desert after we left ancient Egypt? Or does the sukkah recapitulate the cloud of God's presence that protected us unconditionally throughout our wanderings in the desert? Or the answer doesn't have to be either or. The sukkah can simultaneously remind us of our fragility and that we are protected. Indeed, not just this week, but every night of the year, our evening prayers, as we have been reminded, request that God spread over us the sukkah of divine peace. Ufros aleinu sukkot shalomecha. One way that we can read this is that we are not actually asking God in that prayer for a permanent peace, but we are asking God to give us just enough temporary cover, literally, so that we humans, whose job it could and should be to do the hard work of peacemaking and peacekeeping, can actually do that work in earnest. Ufros aleinu sukkot shalomecha. Yesterday, Rabbi Werber and I were talking about the wish, B'sha'a Tovah. May everything happen at just the right time. Culturally, B'sha'a Tovah, not congratulations, is an appropriately reverent, if superstitious, Jewish response when you find, for instance, that someone is expecting a child. I find that its applications are much vaster, from the announcement of an engagement to anticipating the results of, let's say, a college application, becoming a finalist for an award, and frankly, it is even meaningful when death is near. So predictably, my wish tonight is B'sha'a Tovah. At this time of great grief, at this time of great anticipation, there is still no playbook for this moment, even if some people think they know all the next moves. I hope the hints of good news we have heard in these past few days grow into real, live homecomings, so that a week that we associate with the destruction of so many people can turn into a week of celebration as well. My hope is also that these days are an Eit Ratzon, an auspicious time, so that all people who care for one another keep caring and caring harder and harder, and for people who have maybe lost touch a little bit with our responsibilities as human beings to really care for each other, that those people can Zayim Mensch be the best people they can possibly be. And may we all inspire that in each other. Ufros aleinu sukkot shalomecha. May the real memories of the humans we have lost help us to rehumanize every human being who is still right here, waiting for not just a precarious shelter, but to be enveloped in the most incredible cloud of God's presence that we can build here on earth. Shabbat shalom.